in this Binge the Bible, which is like my favorite topic of the entire world. And so in about 5 or 6 minutes, I'm going to walk you through the first 5 books of the Bible. And in the Hebrew Jewish tradition, honestly, the Christian tradition, those first 5 books are called the Torah. Everyone say Torah. Say it like you mean it. Yeah, that was 4 of you. Perfect. All right. So, recap on Genesis. We'll put it up on the screen. Bam. There it is. Genesis. There's 4 parts and then 4 parts. The first 4 parts are creation. Say it. Fall. Flood. Tower. All right. So that's the first part. That's like getting it started. What is it? Creation, fall, flood, tower. Creation, fall, flood, tower. Then you get 4 people. And what this is God actually says, like, this is my family. This is who I want to, this is who I want to use to help make me known. And so those people are Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and then there's this guy named Joseph. He's one of Jacob's sons. All right, so let's say those names all together. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. How does Genesis start? Creation, fall, flood, tower. You're getting better at this. Who are the 4 people? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. Okay, now Joseph ends in Egypt. Okay, Egypt was this place of bounty, and then it became a place of slavery. And so there's 4 big ideas in the book of Exodus. That's the second book, okay? And so these are out of Egypt, like they go out, right? And there was the 10 plagues, all right? And they're on their way to the promised land, but they take a pit stop at Mount Sinai. All right, pit stop Mount Sinai. And what happens there is Moses gets the 10 commandments and instructions for the tabernacle. Okay, so out of Egypt, pit stop Mount Sinai, 10 commandments, instructions for the tabernacle. How does the Bible start? Okay, who are the big 4? Okay, you're getting this. And then Exodus is out of Egypt, pit stop Mount Sinai, 10 commandments, and instructions for the tabernacle. Now, what's the tabernacle? It's like a tent. It's like portable church. Why did God give them instructions for this tent to like take, put up, put down, move around, pick up? Like, I hate camping. Like, what's God thinking here, right? All right, here's why. Next slide. God is holy, and he needed a place that was also holy, so a holy God could dwell with an unholy people. If God is holy and his unholy people are by him, then all of a sudden they would all be like zapped, I think, like just straight up. So you have the reason why the tabernacle existed is so God could be in the presence of his people. How does the Bible start? Big 4. Okay, what happened in Exodus? We out of here. Pit stop Mount Sinai. Then what? Then what? Yeah, tabernacle, all right? And why do we need a tabernacle? So a holy God could dwell with an unholy people, all right? New material. The book of Leviticus, all right? And this is the book of law. And if you ever read it, like, it's a tough read. It's a tough read. It's one of my favorite books. But there are 4 parts to this book. Of the laws, here they are. There are the law of sacrifices. Somehow there were these practices of sacrifices so that God's wrath, it's true, would be satisfied. Okay? Why did God have wrath? Because all his people were sinning. And so they would so we'll talk about that more in a little bit. Then there were the law of the priests. Why did you need priests? Because you needed someone to go between the people and God. And so how they operated in their life, you needed to have special rules. And then there's the law of purity. God wanted his people to live different than the rest of the world. And then there's the law of holiness. This was further clarification of how they were to be different. Now, here's what's super significant. Like, why the book of the law? Why is this? One of the things Jesus said in Matthew 5, verse 17, it says, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law and prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. Go back a slide. So Jesus says, the law of the sacrifices, I didn't come to get rid of them. I came to be the ultimate sacrifice. And he was on the cross. And all of humanity needed someone to go between them and God. That would be a priest. So Jesus was the ultimate go-betweener, all right? Purity, someone to live perfect, that would be Jesus. Holy, set apart, that would be Jesus. Jesus didn't come to get rid of the law. He came to be the law. So how do we remember Leviticus? There's the law of sacrifices, priests, purity, holiness. How does it point to Jesus? He was those things, okay? Now, 2 slides ahead, let's go to the book of Numbers. And it honestly is a lot of counting. Here's the 3 big ideas. Counting the fighting men is just what they did. So the book starts with them counting all of the people of the tribe. So the tribe of this had this many. The tribe of this had this many. And then there's all these wild stories in the wilderness of rebellion. So I just wilderness stories of rebellion, all right? Because they're just like, we don't like you, Moses, and then they died. And then they're like, we don't like you, Moses, and then they died. And then another group, we don't like you, God or Moses, and then they would die. That just seemed to happen. At which point, 40 years pass, and they count all the men again. That's the book of Numbers, all right? Now, book of Deuteronomy. The book of Deuteronomy, this is what that means. The law, the second time. Do it again, all right? All right, and so this is how I remember it. It's a little bit tricky, but Moses gives 3 speeches, and then he dies. First speech, he just tells them the history again. This is what happened. Then he tells them the law, like the 10 Commandments are in there again. And then he says, if you honor God, he will bless you. If you don't, you're cursed. And then he croaks, okay, on top of a hill. At some point, there's a big argument in the angel war field, space-time continuum over his dead body. That's another story. Let's go back. How does the book of the Bible start? Big 4. Give me Exodus. Woo! Why do we need a tabernacle? So, holy God can dwell with the unholy people. All right, Leviticus. Do you remember? 4 laws. What are they? How do they point to Jesus? He is those, right? Numbers. Count the men. Count the men. Yeah. Count the men. Rebellion. Count the men. All right. And then here it is. Deuteronomy. 3 speeches. 3 speeches. Our history. The law again. Blessings and curses. Who takes over after Moses? Joshua. That's the book you're going to read this week. All right. At this time, I'm going to invite my friend, Ainsley, up onto... We're going to go a little bit deeper. We're going to get a little bit into this Leviticus, Numbers. I don't know that we're going to have time to talk about Deuteronomy.
Hello.
Hello. Look at you, all mic'd up. Ainsley, I remember the first time we met. You were in a, you don't? No, because you were 4 months old in a little thingy. Like I think Grant had you. It was wonderful. And when I was prepping for this, and they're like, hey, who do you want to talk to? You were the first person that came to mind. And is it true you have read some of these books we just talked about?
I have read all of them.
You have read all of them. Okay. I love it. I love it. I love it. What's something that's jumped out to you? I mean, because they're not your normal Jesus loves you books.
Right.
Yes.
So I think for me, one of the biggest things is I try to read the Bible with the lens, like, who is God's character? So looking at these books, they are tricky. It's a lot of laws and numbers and names. And so I try to find where is God in all of this, because he's there.
Okay.
So
What'd you find?
So for Leviticus, I found God is holy. And you touched on that a little bit. Why we have these laws is because God is holy and we are unholy. and all of these laws are like a bridge. They bridge the gap between our unholiness and God's holiness.
Oh, I love that.
So, yeah.
That's good. When it came to like what to do when there's mildew in your house, that's weird, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you just keep reading, right? Or did
Yeah.
you clean? Did you try to get the mildew out of your house?
I did not.
Okay. What about Numbers? Did you notice anything in Numbers, like about God or just something that jumped for you?
Yeah, so in Numbers, I noticed God's mercy and his justice. So Numbers is a book where we see a lot of rebellion, and you see that God is just, and he punishes the rebellion, but he also is so merciful. You see that time and time again, the Israelites betray the covenant that they made with God, but he is true to that covenant.
Yeah.
So yeah.
How does that encourage Ainsley?
It's very encouraging because when I read these stories, more often than not, I see myself in the Israelites' position where I'm making the mistakes. I'm the one choosing to say no to God. Yeah. And so to see his mercy displayed time and time again is so encouraging.
I love that. For me, the idea that God is so up there, and yet what Leviticus is like his ways to like get close again, right? Like, so he's not trying to keep that distance. And I like how you're like, he's holy, but then these laws kind of like are a ladder back to him, right? And all the while of like we screw up, he's like, yeah, but we'll work on that. Anything from Deuteronomy? I mean, it was a lot of repeat.
Yeah, I think Deuteronomy focuses a lot on...
Oh, time out. That's beautiful. Did you do that? Anyone else wish they could doodle like that? My doodles were tic-tac-toe boards. That's all I could do. Sorry. Continue. Deuteronomy. Do it again.
Yeah. So Deuteronomy, I think, focuses on the call back to that covenant faithfulness that we see displayed throughout the other books previous to this. So.
Yeah. There's Moses is like, come on, let's get this. We look what we've been through. Let's do this again. When you read these books, though, my guess is, I mean, you were set up a little bit, but like, what questions come to mind, right? Like, this is different than reading like the story of something because it gets, again, it talks about mildew, right? Like, what is that?
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about the purpose of the laws, but like, who are these laws directed towards?
That's a great question. So, in Genesis, I shared like, this is God's family. And what happens in Exodus and Leviticus is this is God's nation now. And so part of the reason of the laws was so that they could be governed, so they could be a society, so they could be a nation and know how to operate. And, you know, I shared like there's 4 kinds of laws, but there's another way to look at it where there's ceremony laws, like this is the ceremony we do. Then there's civil law, this is how we interact as a people. And then there's moral laws, this is how we behave for ourselves. And so your question was, who are they directed to? At the time, they were directed to the Israelites. And so when Jesus comes, do we ignore all of them? We primarily ignore the ceremony ones. That would be like, we have not offered a bull sacrifice in the history of the bridge. Like, we haven't done that, nor a sheep or a goat or a dove one. Like, we don't do the ceremonies like that because Jesus was the ultimate one. The civil one, we have kept some and we have changed some because those were for their nation. We have a nation that has actually adopted some of the civil laws, such as don't murder, right? Like we're like, oh, that was then? That still applies, all right? But there's others, like I was talking about the mildew, whatever, right? Now the third one, the moral, like most of the moral laws were repeated by Jesus or his disciples. And if Jesus was like double stamping on it, those still apply. So they were for them, and most are for now. What else do you got? Like, do you have another question? Not that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So how do these books show Jesus? Like, where do we see Jesus in these books?
Yeah. I shared a little bit Leviticus. Like that one was, I think, super. No one ever taught me that. Like I've just been reading and studying. I think another way you see Jesus is through the life of Moses. So what you find in Moses is he's often putting himself in a position to love the people that are super broken and super hard on him. And what's interesting about the life of Jesus is he died for us while we were still sinners. The idea is Jesus loved us when we were most unlovable. And you kind of see that in Moses. And so that kind of lifts for me. Going back to the book of Leviticus, what's interesting is, I think there's like 27 chapters, give or take. The first 16 or 17 of them are basically like theology. This is what we believe. And then the last one, this is how we live. And that's what like the book of Romans is like. The first chunk of Romans, that book, is this is what you believe. And then and this is how you live it. Ephesians, the first 3 chapters, this is what we believe. The last 3 chapters, this is how we live it. And so I think in a lot of ways, that's helpful for me. You have to learn some things, and then you also have to do things. Now, and I'll throw it back to you in just a second, but I think a lot of times when Jesus was talking to people, he met people who knew the law, and he met people who could obey the law, but they never had their heart change. And Jesus is like, oh, they're hard hearts. Oh, they're hard hearts. And so one of the things that I think is interesting about Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy is you could do all the right things and still have a heart that doesn't want God. And so when I read these, I'm just like, oh, I see myself, because like I could do that, but I would do it for the right reasons. Do you got any other closing thoughts? Something that just like percolated in your mind as you read these books? No?
I think that's about it.
This Sunday, last Sunday I referenced there was a Genesis story and then there was a story in Numbers. This Sunday, we're doing the talking donkey story in the book of Numbers. That was a weird one, right?
Yes, yeah.
And this angel's gonna like slice this dude up, and you're like, why are you gonna do that? And then so the guy he just kept hitting his donkey, and his donkey like laid down, and then he hit his donkey, and then like all of a sudden the donkey started saying, why are you hitting me? Why are you hitting me?
Yep.
So good. You should come to church on Sunday. All right. With that, I think, does that feel, I love this. The first 5 books of the Bible. So good. So many good stories. But these 3 are hard. These 3 are hard. Let me pray for you, and then you are off to your tribes. Father God, you've had ways from the very beginning, and sometimes they're tricky. And so I pray that we would have soft hearts to receive your ways, and then that we would have the courage in your spirit to walk in them. I thank you for how you've opened up your word to Ainsley, and I pray it would open up for the rest of us in our conversations. Amen.